Good morning, everybody. Thank you very, very much for being here on a Saturday morning, for braving the rain and the weather to be here at Aliran for the launch of Theresa Lim Chin Chin's book. My name is Daniel Anthony. I am Theresa Lim Chin Chin's oldest son. Welcome to Aliran. First and foremost, a big, warm thanks to Aliran for providing us not just the venue for our launch today, but also for a nice hot cup of coffee at the back, please help yourself, and some refreshments later today. Just 11 months ago, I brought both my parents out for a great buffet dinner to celebrate Father's Day 2025. And none of us at that moment would have predicted that would be the last time that we would dine together at a restaurant. For it was just a month after that when Theresa Lim Chin Chin would fall asleep for the very last time. Malaysia would then wake up to the news that it had lost one of its unsung fighters. But losing a fighter does not mean losing a fight, just as one fallen soldier does not mean that the battle is over. Today, we gather for the launch of Theresa Lim Chin Chin, Liberation Theology, Operation Lalang, and the Price of Pursuing Justice. I'd like to be clear, we're not here to launch Operation Lalang again. That's long over, okay? Now, this book is written in part by Lim Chin Chin herself, as she recalled some of the harrowing memories that she experienced during Operation Lalang. So some out there may argue that these dark chapters of Malaysian history, they are wounds that should be left in the past, that these are books that should be closed, we shouldn't revisit it. Oh, oppression is over, Operation Lalang is over, Mahathir regime is over, etc., blah, blah, blah. But we all know that wounds that are merely ignored without being treated would end up festering. We often see injustice as a distant villain, an abstract tragedy that can only affect these faraway places, like Myanmar or Palestine. It is indeed a curse disguised as a blessing when the powers that be can sweep injustice under the rug and to make things seem all right to most people and create a complacent society that is willing to look the other way. That's why it is especially valuable that we have this book out today, a book that details what it has been to be subject to political oppression in light of backwards developments in our wonderful Madani government that has resorted to a very primitive oppression that is actually banning books. In the rush of social media today, where attention spans are counted in seconds, a book almost feels out of place. It feels difficult, actually, to launch. But Chin Chin's story is not something that can be told in a TikTok or a tweet. It is not something that can be summarized in just one blog post, nor condensed into a few paragraphs by ChatGPT. With that, I'd like to invite Aliran President Anil Neto to deliver opening remarks for today.
Thank you, everybody, for attending on this wet morning. First, I'd like to welcome Dave and Daniel and Chee Keong to our office. And Chee Heng Leng also going to speak later. Yeah. So actually, this whole book reminds me of that first period when I finished my studies and came back and trying to figure out what to do. And someone passed me the Aliran magazine, and on the cover was this whole thing about Operation Lalang, no? And on the cover was Chandra on the cover and detained and all the articles on the, I think I'll show it here. And inside that particular issue of the Aliran Monthly, this was October, the first issue after Operation Lalang, we had this article, I think written by Dave Anthony about Chin Chin. Then followed by a couple of months later, another article. So this was my first exposure to Chin Chin in the Aliran Monthly. And as somebody who was just trying to figure out what to do and looking at faith in a new angle, a different angle, because a few years ago, we had this turbulence in Eastern Europe where the Solidarity movement was trying to topple the government in putting up a stern challenge to the government in Poland. And a Catholic priest by the name of Jerzy Popiesko, something like that, was brutally murdered because he was speaking out in support of the labor unions in Poland. And also around that time, the events in Poland received wide publicity. And also around that time in South America, we had another archbishop who was assassinated, El Salvador, Oscar Romero. But the media coverage was not the same. So I was wondering why the difference in the coverage, no? Romero's assassination and Jerzy Popiesko in Poland. No? So later then I came to realize it was all this ideology and also the emergence of liberation theology in South America. And then when I looked at all these church workers, especially in Operation Lalang, who were detained, something connected, no, between all these different struggles. And in the sense, at that time, it must have been an isolating period for the family and the friends of Chin Chin. But I think they were on the right side of history. They were the pioneers of a new movement in the church, especially. A new way of looking at faith and what it means to be Christian or person of faith in the world. And I think they have been vindicated in the long run because we have lived long enough to see Romero becoming a saint in the church. And so at that time, it must have felt very disappointing. I think Terence Gomez spoke about it during launch in KL, how Chin Chin felt very let down by the church, and especially the institutional church, and even some of the groups she worked with. But I think she has been, the family, and especially Chin Chin, has been vindicated in the long run, because the founder of the liberation theology movement, when Pope Francis became a pope, just a few months after becoming a pope, he invited Gustavo Guterres to the Vatican. And he was very much inspired by liberation theology, maybe not all the ideological elements, but Francis took on many of Guterres' thing. And when Guterres passed away in 2024, at the age of 96, Pope Francis said that actually this was a man of the church. He knew how to suffer. He was called to suffer. He took on this suffering, no? And in the same way, I think for the Malaysian church, people like Chin Chin and Dave and all that were pioneers. And Cecilia. Yeah, so I think it was they were ahead of their time, basically. And they may have been let down by the power structures, but that's always been the case in history. People who are pioneers are always feel left out. And I think the larger context also, it's not just within the church. The people who are detained under the ISA, they might have suffered a lot. But I think through that suffering, we saw a lot of changes coming to Malaysia. And after 1987 in particular, the civil society movement blossomed. Swaram was formed, and a whole plethora of other NGOs were formed. And even the ISA itself, in 1997, the 10th anniversary of the ISA arrest, I met Prema in Kamunting. Outside, we were protesting outside against Kamunting. By then, I had become an Aliran member because when I came back, I think it was a year after ISA, I became an Aliran member. Then 1997, I met Prema outside the gates of Kamunting. FRU were there and all that, no? The 10th anniversary of ISA. So well before Bersih and all that, we already had these ISA protests, no? And even before the first Bersih rally in 2007, a few months earlier, there was also another whereas in Kamunting, the ISA protests were like maybe about 300 people, 300, 400 people. And when it came to the year 2000, after Reformasi, so in a way, Anwar also played a role through his Reformasi movement at that time. By the time of 2000, the protests had swollen to about 2,000 people, no? And then by 2007, they had the first big anti-ISA rally in KL. This is before Hindraf and Bersih and all that. And that rally, I think, drew about maybe 30, 40,000 people. No? So you can see the ISA itself became a catalyst for change. I mean, the suffering of the ISA, the brutality of the ISA, the oppression under the ISA itself became a catalyst for change. And I used to go and give one or two talks in Ipoh about the ISA. This was while all this was happening. And I was surprised that among the Catholics, I thought we would have a receptive audience. Among the Catholics themselves, they were giving me a hard time as a speaker. And then later on, I met some retired police people at Inira's restaurant, no? They said, we were there, at your talk. And they gave you a hard time, right? They were laughing among themselves, no? They said, yeah, but things have changed. But another turning point came when 3 modern-day activists got arrested under the ISA. I think 2 or 3. It was Raja Petra, Theresa, and the other one was the Chinese journalist, I forget her name. So when they were arrested, and this was just after I think Penang had fallen to DAP, or was it before? Maybe after. And when they were arrested, the middle class changed. So it took a while for So all this contributed to the change in government because the ISA itself became seen as a tool of oppression. No? So, and finally, the ISA itself was abolished, and Suharto by then was in the picture. So you can see that through all these changes, the ISA, the people who worked in the 1980s, who did the groundwork, they were the ones who contributed to social and political change. So with that, I'm pleased to welcome all of you here, and hope you learn more about our friend Theresa.
Thank you very much. Now, let's move on to our speakers for today. I'd like to invite our first speaker, Chow Chee Keong, a fellow ISA detainee of Lim Chin Chin during Operation Lalang.
Thank you very much, Daniel. I think I may have to sit down because I have to refer to my notes. Yeah. Yeah?
It's okay.
Just let me know. Okay, I'm truly honored to be invited to say a few words in this book launch in Penang. Let me just give you a quick introduction of who I am and why I'm up here. Usually during book launches, I'm usually down there. I was arrested during Operation Lalang, a day after Chin Chin. At the time, I was a civil engineer at the Drainage and Irrigation Department in the Federal Territory. So I was a district engineer. And if you know the DID KL office, my office is right outside the gate of Bukit Aman. It was too close for comfort. They walked from their office to my office. Okay, so I probably bumped into them, during our tea break at the Tanglin Hospital, which is just around the corner. So I suppose I was just too close for comfort. Yeah. So after the 60-day solitary confinement, both Chin Chin and I, we were given the 2-year detention orders. and was sent to Kamunting. She was released in June, and I was released in August of the following year, 1988. So just to show how farcical this entire Operation Lalang is, in as far as I'm concerned, is that after I was released, I was allowed to go back to my former department, the same office, same desk, and they just gave me back all my back pay, minus the interest. I should have asked them for the interest payment. But the entire experience felt almost like, you went into a film set, and you're an extra, and the movie just ended, the shooting just ended, and they allow you back to normal life. And the only thing is the stunts were real, and you have to go do it all with real pain and real torture. So, and I was given back all the so-called national security clearance. So a few days before that, I'm a security risk, and a few days later, I'm okay. Because I was in charge of all the dams. Okay, the Batu Dam, the Klang Gates Dam. So they're not afraid that I may just open up the gate and flood the whole city. So that's why I felt it was like a film set, It's like, Film Nagara, just call you in, okay, come, I need extras, and please do this, do that. And then after finishing the movie, they'll said, okay, we're done. You can go back and continue your job as a civil engineer. So, but the pain is real, okay? Well, Chin Chin and I never really worked together in any NGOs or social activism. Our lives did overlap when Chin Chin introduced PETA. I don't know whether people know PETA, the Philippines Educational Theatre Association. When she introduced PETA to Malaysia, she got to know PETA when she was in the Philippines. So we got to know PETA when a group of us UK returnees, we set up a theatre group called Pentas. And so by 1985, Chin Chin already have kind of left the popular theatre activities. So my wife and I, she was invited to go to Philippines for a women's conference, and I got to know PETA myself. So when PETA came to Malaysia for the KL Film Festival, we got them to help us to conduct some theatre workshops. So that's how I got to know Chin Chin during that period of time, because she attended at least one of our the theatre workshop, the popular theatre workshops. So my wife, our lives also overlapped a little bit because Kening was also involved in some women's group, and of which Chin Chin was also involved in. So through that overlap, I got to know her more on a social level than anything else. But after our detention, our families became much closer. I think it's probably because of the detainee families the association. After I came out of Kamunting, we used to visit Dave, and this is the first time I met Daniel. He was just a year older than my son, Ewan, when we came back from the US. And I'm always amazed at Dave's ingenuity and his innovativeness. It's an amazing person. I'm always amazed by it. We kind of lost touch for a number of years when Kenning and I migrated to North America. From 1990 to 97. And it was during those years that Chin Chin and I both made big changes to our lives. I quit engineering as well as the civil service. And Chin Chin left her social work. I did my MBA in Toronto, and she went to study IT. So we both entered the corporate sector after that. And it was during those years when I was in the US working for Sime Darby that I get to come back every year on home visit, all expenses paid. And we always, one of the things we usually do is to go visit Dave and Chin Chin in SS2 because we were staying at SS4 in my old house before we migrated. So we used to meet up quite often. So when my family returned to Malaysia after our, I call it extended camping trip, it always feels very strange living in North America because you always feel very alone, you know. You're never quite accepted. So it was nice to finally come back home. So that's that brief history behind Dave and my family. Okay, about the detention, this is actually the first time I'm talking about it publicly, okay, after 40 years. I don't talk much about it. People who know that I'm an ex-detainee never ask me what happened. And people who don't know about it, I don't tell. So it's like living two different lives, you know, with my activist friends and my working life, you know. So, but I have kind of accepted it, and those 300 over days in incarceration is kind of very deeply buried in my psyche. I have great difficulty recalling the pain. I think partly maybe because of old age, okay, that I have forgotten a lot of it, and partly because of the way the mind works, and it kind of protects you from the pain. It's kind of like the oyster, you know, how it's formed. It's there's a speck of sand in it, and it irritates them, and it naturally layers the irritant with the nacre, and finally becomes a pearl. So that's how I would describe it. I have totally forgotten about my experience in Kamunting and the 60 days. I cannot, if any of you were one of my interrogators, I don't recognize you, okay? So you're safe. I don't remember your name. I don't remember how you look like. That's how the mind works. So when I was asked to prepare for this talk, I went to the back room and dusted the thick dust from the storage boxes and took out the notes. And only then did I remember what actually happened and who are they, what did they do to me. So that's how it's the last few days preparing for this talk was quite emotional for me. And I'm actually deeply moved by what Chin Chin wrote in a book. I just want, when I read it, I felt both moved and as well as sad that I never quite found out. And this is what she wrote. Heng Leng was the first to get a family visit. Her aunts lived in Penang, which is nearer to Kamunting than KL. When she returned, she related how Chee Keong had been physically tortured. Chee Keong is the founder of the Pentas, an amateur theatre group inspired by and founded on the principles of PETA. When I heard this, I broke down and sobbed violently. I felt responsible. So when I read that chapter, I felt rather bad because I didn't know that and I would have explained to her that she's in no way responsible for what happened to me. If I've known, I would have told her that she's absolutely not responsible for introducing PETA because I went to Philippines and I got to know PETA myself personally. So it's not her fault. And even if she did introduce PETA to Pentas, it's still not her fault, okay? She didn't do this to me, but she felt bad nonetheless. So I didn't know it affected her that much. So I just want to share a few light stories about my 60-day solitary confinement, just to lighten up the atmosphere a little bit. Everybody looks very tense here. So one of the stories I like to tell friends is this. It's actually quite similar to what Chin Chin wrote, Heng Leng, about that little thing that happened between you and her. So one day, one of the guards came to deliver my dinner. Okay, very sharp on time. And after stuffing me the newspaper wrapped food, usually he would just zop. He would slide the door. It's a little hatched on the metal door, about that big, and he would just close it back. But for some reason, that day, he didn't. And then, wow. So I looked out through that little window, and miraculously or coincidentally, the opposite cell, the window, that hatch was also left open. And so I looked through it, and then I saw this face staring back at me. And it was a Chinese man wearing glasses. And he was also very surprised to see me. So we were looking at each other, and he he put on a smile, and then he did this. So what do you think he was trying to? Do better than that, okay? Come on. Are you a Christian? Okay? All right, so he was, I just guessed because when the guard kind of like sensed something is not right, he turned around, and he realized we were looking at each other, sup, sup. And that was the last time I saw that face. And apparently I found out much later that it was Dr. Chow Kai Fu, the dentist. Yeah, so he was arrested for proselytizing Christianity to the Malays. So that was him. And it was, it stuck with me. I never got to meet him after that because I think he migrated to Australia. But eventually he came back and became the president of the Malaysian Dental Association. So that was one of the little stories. The other one that I like to share with you is another incident which is closer to the end of the 60-day period. It was towards the end. And one day, it was already after dinner, okay? So the hatch door opened again, zip, right? How come I already have my food? Then in came the hand with an aluminum foil wrapped, okay? And ini orang kasih. So itu orang kasih. So I took it and I sat down on the cement platform and I opened it up. Wow. It was Indian chicken curry rice, okay, with chutney and all. I tell you, even though my hands were all dirty, I just went straight for it. All right, there's no cutlery because they're afraid that we'll kill ourselves. So we can only eat with our hands. So it was the best Indian curry rice I've ever eaten in my whole life. Okay? So the question is, siapa yang kasih? Why? So I found out later that it was Kapal Singh, who told the guard to give it to me. But I don't know Kapal at that time personally. So, so you see, even in the most strictest of condition of draconian regime, you have a little kelonggaran if you have the connection. You get takeaways. Okay, so we are having our newspaper wrapped rice with dried fish and a few shreds of vegetables, and he gets his, aluminum foil wrapped Indian curry chicken rice. So that's life okay? So we just have to accept. I do used to hear voices of Indian officers, police officers talking to him because it's just next to my cell. So that's a little story which I would like to share with you. So, in closing, I would like to talk about the bigger political power play behind Operation Lalang. Do you think we are going to have a repeat of such mass arrests now? Madani or maybe PN, the next GE16? Do you think this will happen again? I mean, ISA has been repealed, but we still have the SOSMA and all the other POTA and all. Yeah. So during the 60-day solitary confinement, one of the things they kept drilling into us is that, okay, in the Malaysian context, CPM equals communists, equals Marxists, equals conscientization, equals subversives, okay, equals threat to national security. That's, yeah. So they work backwards, okay? They work backwards. So you are doing conscientization work. All this drama, workshops, and all the plays that we did on squatters and environment, these are all trying to make the government look bad. So you are a threat to national security. Therefore, you're a subversive. Therefore, you must be part of that Marxist, United Front. Therefore, you must be a Marxist and you are communists, and so on and so forth. That's why you have to be locked up. On and on and on, okay? So if you don't agree, they will beat the hell out of you to make you say what they want you to say. So in the end, okay lah, right? We just, yeah. You give them a little bit, then you get your specs back. You give them a little bit more, then you get your pillow. You give them a little bit, then they, So it's like that. This whole thing is eliciting confession is very much part of William Sagan's, the techniques. Yeah, my wife is looking at her watch, so I think I've talked too much. So I just want to, I share with you this, this little thing, and that the toolbox is still there. All these techniques on how they, elicit confessions from any of the people that they detain. It's still in their toolbox. It's just when and who they will apply it to. So just bear that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yes, there's a lot of manipulation that happens in the toolbox, and it's quite prevalent how this manipulation is used once you read this book. Because for the first time, two accounts are placed side by side. You have Lim Chin Chin's account from her journal that she wrote, recounting what happened during Operation Lalang, and also the journal written by the author, my father, Dave Anthony. And you see the parallels and inconsistencies based on how much information was exchanged with them inside and outside the cell. This is all part of a big toolbox of manipulation and scope creep of how context of words can be done. I like to share a bit because a few years ago, I was a journalist at Malaysia Kini during the COVID pandemic. And I was brought in for questioning when I covered a doctor's walkout in Mayap Serdang to protest that the doctors and the housemen were not getting contracts from the government after the service to the government to handle the big COVID mess. And during the police press conference the day before I was called in for questioning, the police said, the journalists who went in will be called in for questioning because they went in to a quarantine center for COVID patients, which is akin to suicide. Did you know that suicide is against the law? They brought this out at the press conference. This was broadcast from IPD, So suddenly I'm, a criminal for going into, for attempting suicide on the job or something like that. So for next, I'd like to invite Ms. Chee Heng Leng to come up and share with us. She's also a fellow detainee under Operation Lalang.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's not very stable. Better take it back. Okay. Thanks. Okay. First of all, thank you very much, Dave, for asking me to speak here today. And also, congratulations on the publication and launch of your book. You know, from start to finish, Dave only took like about, I think, around 8 months to get this book out. I have to admit that I did not think he could do it so quickly. And even when he presented his manuscript to some of us for comments in mid-January, and then he told us that he's going to launch this book in mid-April, and mid-April was chosen because Chin Chin's body, which she gave to the university for teaching under the Silent Mentor program, would be returned to the family then in a ceremony for cremation and last rites. But when he said mid-April, I was thinking, perhaps you should postpone it, Dave, to Chin's birthday at the end of July, give yourself more time. However, here we are. Dave with his book, which was actually launched in KL on 18th April, right on target. Well done, Dave. You proved us non-believers wrong. Well, this book is first and foremost Dave's tribute to his wife, Chin Chin. A love story, as Kwa Kia Sung puts it. Chin Chin is, of course, the central figure in the story. But the story is told in a very unique way. It incorporates not only Dave's writings and Chin Chin's writings, but also the writings of Chin's sister, Elizabeth, her 2 sons, Daniel and Joel. So in this way, it's very much a family memoir as well. And it also includes contributions from Chin Chin's friends, myself included, and other significant people in her life. So in the end, for the readers, the book's readers, even if they have not known Chin Chin at all, they would, through these very different perspectives, gain quite a multi-dimensional picture of what she was like. This book is a compelling read, not least because of its personal stories. Beyond the personal stories, it is a book that makes a very important contribution to the history of social activism in this country. A large portion of the book, in fact at least half of its pages, is on the experiences of Chin Chin and Dave when Chin Chin was arrested and detained under the ISA, together with over 100 people in a police dragnet called Operation Lalang. So at the core of the book is Chin Chin's own recollections of her arrest and subsequent detention in Kamunting. However, it was written retrospectively, 18 years after her detention. Nonetheless, I'm amazed by the vivid details that her writing conjures up. I myself, like Chee Keong, had forgotten all of my experience, much of it anyway, during that time. But reading her clearly written recollections, I began to remember many of the things. Now, in addition to Chin Chin's retrospective journal, Dave has also juxtaposed their letters to each other during that period. And also Dave's diary that he wrote at that time. So these pieces are actually written as and when the things happened. And they combine to give us a very direct, unmediated glimpse of that time period, capturing the immediate emotions and viewpoints as events played out. Now, this is an invaluable legacy to leave behind, not just at the personal level for their own children and grandchildren and those of us who were affected, our own children and grandchildren, but also for future generations of history students of this country. Now, let me talk about a bit about the contents of the book. The title of the book is Theresa Lim Chin Chin, Liberation Theology, Operation Lalang, and the Price of Pursuing Justice. So although the book is about Chin Chin and her life from childhood until death, nevertheless, through the lens of Chin Chin's life and of her faith and commitment, we also learn about liberation theology and the social and political causes and movements that she was involved in. These, of course, eventually led to Operation Lalang, which brought life-wrought changes to those caught in it. Hence the subtitle, quote unquote, The Price of Pursuing Justice. Now, in all of this, Chin Chin was, of course, not alone. There were many others who were with her. I was involved in some of the social movements that Chin Chin was involved in. And together with her, I too was caught in the dragnet of Operation Lalang. And reading this book resurfaces some of these memories of what that period was like. And it also allows me to reflect on some of those experiences that many of us went through together. So, to just give a short explanation, when we were arrested under the ISA, the police had custody for us for the first 60 days. But to imprison us beyond that time, the government had to issue detention orders. So Chin Chin's detention order, as well as many others, including mine, I believe, referred specifically to things that we were purported to have done from 1980 to October 1987. So this was the time period. What were the things that happened during that time? If you were to remember, Mahathir had just become Prime Minister in July 1981. And on the legislative front, the Mahathir regime began immediately to clamp down on civil society with the 1981 and 1983 amendments to the Societies Act 1966, which gave far and wide powers to the minister to control societies. So the minister could label societies as political societies, and he had the power to look through your books to, declare this and that. These amendments was, of course, strongly opposed by a broad spectrum of civil society organizations. And the opposition, if I remember correctly, I was in there because I was a member of EPSM at that time, Environmental Protection Society Malaysia, Gurmit Singh, and also Selangor Graduate Student Society. But it was spearheaded, the opposition was spearheaded by the Bar Council, Aliran, and ABIM, which was at that time led by Anwar Ibrahim. Of course, Anwar Ibrahim, the following year, 1982, was co-opted into UMNO, and the rest is history, as they say. But this clamp down on Societies Act was in fact just the first of very many crises that rose as the decade unfolded. Different sectors of society organized to either resist governmental action or to fight for their rights. And so you had, in fact, from the monarchy, which resisted the constitutional amendments that took away the Agong's powers to, pass laws. Then you had the Chinese schools, the educationists. Then you had who protected the sending of people who did not know Mandarin to Chinese schools as administrators. And then you had urban settlers fighting, who were facing eviction, railway workers who had been living along railway tracks for many umpteen years, facing eviction, had religious groups, and of course, our women's groups, protesting violence against women. In the early 1980s, Chin Chin, myself, and many others, we had just graduated from university, and we were entering or re-entering Malaysian society, and we were filled with youthful ideas and idealism. We wanted to work sincerely for social justice for the poor and marginalized groups, and we wanted to make our contributions towards a better society. And in that period of the early 1980s, many women's groups were formed all over the country. So, you know, we had in KL, we had WAO, AWAM, we had SAWO in Sabah, we had WCC in Penang, and many others, okay? And in KL, eventually, many groups came together to organize a campaign against violence against women, for which we formed a joint action group. We carried out a large event in 1985, mobilized a lot of people, including men, everybody, women and children. We had walk and wheels and all that. And in April 1987, we took to the streets to protest against the brutal rape and murder of 9-year-old Ang Mei Hong. And in fact, this was the beginning of Citizens Against Rape, the banner under which actions against rape have been taken since that time. But I think the thing that irked the powers to be at that time was the action of taking to the streets. And many of the groups took to the streets, the urban settlers, the fighting against eviction, etc., etc. And then in May 1987, we were shocked when the Singapore government used the ISA to arrest 16 people. Eventually, it became 22 people. They were community workers. They were Catholic church workers, theatre practitioners. There were 2 lawyers, So Lang and Tang Fong Ha, I believe. And the security operation was codenamed Operation Spectrum. The people who detained were accused of being part of a Marxist conspiracy to subvert the government. The thing is, many of these detainees were friends of ours. We knew them. So we organized an overseas campaign for their release. And we also facilitated the visit of the International Mission of Jurists. I remember at that time, I could be wrong because I'm just relying on memory. Aliran was one of the organizations that lent its name, although they were in Penang and we were operating in KL. I remember making phone calls, and I believe, we depended on Aliran for support also. But of course, in KL, the people in front were also the Bar Council and essentially the Bar Council, because we were organizing the visit of the International Mission of Jurists. And I remember at that time I was doing my PhD, so although it was a group effort and we discussed all things in the group, but when it came to running around during office hours, of course, I was the one, right? Because I had, quote unquote, I was free, okay? Because I was doing my PhD thesis, I didn't have to attend office, I didn't have to, give classes. So I was the one running around, and I believe my husband Boon Kian was there running around too. And if I remember correctly, Rajan as well, Rajan Devaraj. So it was the Singapore arrest that made us think that this could happen in Malaysia at that time, okay? And perhaps others were also discussing this possibility. But as for Chin Chin and myself, we were already having our women's groups, which we called the Women's Development Collective, which was a small group. And we tried among us to foresee who among us would be most likely to be taken in. We wrongly speculated that those among us who are in the public eye would be most vulnerable. So people like Irene Fernandez, for example. In fact, Irene was never taken in. In fact, it was just the opposite, People like me and Chin Chin, who were hardly ever came out in the public eye, we were the ones who were taken in. Anyway, so the first arrests were made in the early hours of October 27th. Myself and Tan Ka Keng. Tan Ka Keng, he was active with Gurmeet Singh at that time in Environmental Protection Society. He was living a few doors away from me in Cecilia's house. We were the first two to be arrested. Cecilia was away. She was somewhere, I don't know where. Yeah. I think she went somewhere else and she flew to Hong Kong. But the person in the house with him was another friend. I don't know whether she'll appreciate me revealing. Anyway, never mind. But she was so scared, when the police came for me and Ka Keng, it was at the same time. And she was so scared that she apparently, she didn't even make a sound. She didn't come out. And she didn't, in fact, she was totally paralyzed and didn't even, in fact, contact other people after the day after that. So I remember the fear, and I remember the trembling, and the very cold that I felt as the police entered my home. And in my house, they spent several hours going through all my books. And I was an academic, right? So I was a university lecturer. I had shelves and shelves of books. So academics among us, take note. And finally, they took away several boxes of them, and myself included together with them. So much of Chin Chin's experience that is related in the book is very familiar to me. During the first 60 days of police custody and practically solitary confinement, which, by the way, the police say is not solitary confinement. If it's solitary confinement, you wouldn't even be able to see your interrogators. Okay. So there was non-stop interrogation, non-stop. I remember I wasn't allowed to sleep for, I think it was 3 days, three straight days, 72 hours. So I had sleep deprivation. So mental fatigue, if you just feel very fatigued, there's emotional manipulation and fearful threats. So they wouldn't say, so like for Chin Chin in the book, she said she was threatened with rape. I was threatened, not verbally, but they acted out as though they were going to inject me with something. And they acted it out in such a way that you really believe it's going to happen. So it was like a role play, but I'm not quite sure how Chin Chin was threatened, but she was threatened with rape. So your mind is actually working continuously all that time, during that time. What to say, what not to say, how to say it, until finally you get so tired that you just give up, as Chee Keong said, give up. And the intense interrogation can also warp your memory. For example, I had attended a youth camp in the Philippines, and they wanted me to testify that there were armed guerrillas there. Of course, there were not, and I had said that I did not see any armed people, nor any, rifles and all that. But they kept on asking, and they really tire you out until I myself finally became totally unsure. Oh, did I see armed guerrillas? Maybe there were. So you yourself became unsure of what you had actually experienced. It became totally like you know. And it could happen the other way as well, because they keep on asking me about a meeting on Bakun Dam, and it was a huge meeting, and it had taken place in my house. And I totally did not remember any of it at all. And I insisted that I wasn't there. I didn't remember. I insisted. But actually, when I came out, I found out that it actually had happened. So, you know, it can happen both ways. And then they try to, you know, cast aspersions. For example, myself, Cecilia, Ka Keng, you know, Prema, the other Prema, Gopalan's wife, you know, and then Ka Keng's girlfriend at the time, Carol. We had gone on a hiking trip to Gunung Nuang. And Gunung Nuang, as you know, is the highest peak in Selangor. And then they grilled us on that. What happened? Because they said we were training to be guerrillas. Okay, if it wasn't so, if you're not so under threat, you would totally laugh. But of course, at that time, you were trying to say no, you know, we were not training to be guerrillas. Anyway, finally, when we were served with the 2-year detention orders and sent to the Kamunting camp, of course, it was a blow in the sense that, you know, it was another two long years in detention. But in a way, it was also such a relief. There were only 4 women who were served with detention orders: Cecilia, Irene Xavier, besides Chin Chin and myself, and we were put together in the same place. It was still a prison, of course, with its many restrictions and prohibitions, but at least we were together. And I dare say, in fact, one of the unintended consequences of our detention in Kamunting is that unlikely friendships were formed. For example, who would think that Muhammad Sabu would have formed a friendship with Lim Guan Eng, you know? And, but they did, all right? Who knows what came out of that? Did Amana come out of that? Okay. I mean, not Amana, but the relationship between Amana and DAP. Okay. And we had not known, 3 of us had known each other, of course, Chin Chin, Cecilia, and myself. But we had not known Irene Xavier well. But through that experience, we got to know her very well. So friendships were formed. And in Kamunting, we had visits from family friends, at least family members and friends, at least once a week. Friends could not visit us, but we claimed, many of us claimed people who came, they were cousins. I say, yeah, he's my cousin, you know. And then we also had many friends who were lawyers, so whoever came was a lawyer. We just signed, he's my lawyer, okay? And so from Penang, my friends who were lawyers were Lung Tai, Mohidin, Rajamurti. I'm sure many of you would have known them. And in Kamunting, we fell into a routine that had many other things. We had food sent. We did not cook because there were only 4 of us, but the men's camp cooked. I mean, they had I don't think we were given very good, high-quality rations, but I think some of us managed to get things sent in from outside. And I remember, even though Muhammad Sabu did not know us, he was a good cook. He cooked, he sent food over to us. And Kapal Singh, whenever he had family visits, he also sent food to us. So, yeah, very good curries, you know. And so that was friendships even across camps when we didn't even know each other at first. We fell into a routine, and that routine incorporated a yoga session every day. Tan Leok Yi, many of you here would also know her. She had passed me a book on yoga through my family, and we used this book to practice every day. In fact, we exerted peer pressure on each other. No, you cannot sit out, okay? Have to come. So we exerted and we used to practice, and eventually we became quite good at yoga. We could do handstands, headstands, spinal twists. And in the book, towards the end of her life, Dave related, towards the end of her life, when medicines no longer could help very much, Chin Chin went back to yoga. She was doing yoga with a group of supportive friends, among them Mary Cardoza, Judith Low. And she was doing yoga up until a few weeks, right, before her death, before her final admission to hospital, sorry. At her memorial service, I remembered Chin Chin as a first among equals. She was indeed an exceptional person. In her commitment to service, in her steadfastness, in her clarity of vision, her perseverance in all that she does, in her moral clarity, and in the persistently positive way. She may have her moments of doubt, her moments of sadness, but she was persistently positive in the way in which she faced adversity and her many illnesses. And with this book, Dave has done much to honor her memory. And with this book, Dave has also gifted us with the preservation of memories of a very important moment in our own history. Thank you, Dave.
Check. And thank you very much. Now I'd like to invite the author of the book, Dave Anthony, to say a few words and also to share his experience. Would you like to sit?
Good morning, and thank you to Aliran for launching the book. Theresa Lim Chin Chin was a lifelong member of Aliran. She was the parish secretary in the Church of Our Mother of Perpetual Help in Ipoh. She was also the founding member of the Perpetual Help Communication Center there, and also a prominent activist in women's rights. When Chin Chin was a student in Form 6 in St. Michael's Institution, Ipoh, she saw little relevance of what she was studying to what was going on in society, like the realities of poverty and unequal opportunities. What keeps the poor people poor, however hard they work? Despite their struggle, they can hardly make a living. How much of it was caused by personal failures, and how much by social structures that oppress? She was looking for an answer to these questions, which set in motion within her a moral compass that steered her along the path that led to social justice, to which she dedicated her life. She went to KL Archdiocese and worked with the National Office for Human Development. Father Gautier and the late Archbishop Sota Fernandez sent her to the Philippines to study social work, where she was exposed to liberation theology. When she returned, she coordinated the nationwide Lenten campaign and was also the national coordinator of the Young Christian Workers, the YCW movement. She implemented the principles of liberation theology and worked among the poor people for social justice. For doing this, Chin Chin was accused of promoting communism. She was arrested, detained, and tortured, just like Chee Heng Leng and Chee Keong related to you, under the Internal Security Act. She passed away on July the 20th last year of various illnesses. We have a book just published on her, which is being launched today by courtesy of Aliran, by Anil Netto, the president of Aliran. I'd like to quote Dr. Kwa Kia Sung, who was also detained in Operation Lalang. He says, Chin Chin, an activist, a social activist, a defender of justice, endured the trauma of Operation Lalang. Her passing after years of illness linked to autoimmune disease is a solemn reminder that the consequences of repression do not end when the prison gates open. They linger in the body, in the mind, and in the unfinished struggle for justice. Chin Chin's work was so impactful that she was later identified by activists as an unsung Malaysian hero or heroine who bravely spoke truth to power. Let me dwell a little bit on liberation theology. Chin was exposed to liberation theology in the Philippines as a form of Christian social activism. Liberation theology is a theological approach and a social movement that interprets the Christian message through the experience of the poor and the oppressed. They wanted liberation from political, economic, and social injustice. The movement arose in Latin America in the context of political unrest, economic exploitation, and oppressive military regimes. It is a commitment to justice, addressing the sinful structures of society that perpetuate exploitation and poverty. In Latin American countries in the 1960s, powerful multinational corporations and domestic business elites were actively colluding with the governing politicians to control and marginalize the peasantry. Some priests and bishops and lay people at that time, working with the poor, encouraged the young Christian students, workers, and agriculturalists to form basic communities in order to understand theology in a context where they were confronted with economic injustice and political oppression. There was also at that time an epoch-making revival in the Catholic Church with the Second Vatican Council, spearheaded by progressive theologians. Encouraged by the documents of Vatican II, people's movements arose in Latin America, inspired by their faith. They questioned what just development meant and the causes of underdevelopment. The question was raised on how to achieve a self-sustained economic development. They felt that they had to reverse the process of exportation of prime products of the country and the importation of manufactured products, which made them dependent exclusively on foreign trade. The Latin American countries were, at that time, being exploited by North America. the official church there was also seen to be aligned more towards the colonizers and the wealthy. The church was preaching salvation to the individual, but was not addressing the societal aspect of sin. According to traditional theology, the objective was to save oneself from sin, from personal sin, by repentance, so that one can acquire the grace of God and save one's soul from hell and attain eternal bliss in the afterlife of heaven. The missionary endeavors of the church were to offer this salvation to all and make people believers. Liberation theology, on the other hand, demanded a radical reorientation of the church's mission, not merely as a dispenser of sacraments, but as an active agent of social transformation. Gustavo Gutierrez of Peru, the founder of Liberation Theology, says that Christians must find new ways of being present in the world of the people and be a sign of the liberation brought by the Lord of history. Yes, there is poverty and suffering, and the response was to engage in charitable works, which will gain merits for eternal life. When liberation theology began in Latin America in the second half of the last century, the priests found that charity and welfare only perpetuated the problem of poverty and did not solve it. To understand the poor, they had to be immersed into the lives of the poor and look at society through the eyes of the poor. And what they saw was injustice, exploitation, marginalization, and dependence. They found that the oppressive situation of poverty was built into the very structures of society. Injustice was the direct result of the political, economic, and social structures, and even within the cultural and religious structures. The poor were deprived of a dignified human life. Their poverty dehumanized them. Traditional theology failed to see this. The reflection of the Latin American pastors with the people led to a new theology that cried out for liberation. The social situation itself was sinful. Salvation for them was primarily liberation from oppression. The sin situation within the state was demonstrated by military dictatorships, which, in the interest of capitalism, used national security measures through police control of all public demonstrations, a situation not unfamiliar to us. The social situation of poverty is so dehumanizing that the individual becomes a non-person. The target is not the non-believer who needs to be converted, but the non-person who needs to have their personhood restored by way of liberation. It is on this basis that liberation theology developed. From the 1960s on, there was a feverish spread of the theology of liberation. The theological rationale is that if God is on the side of the poor, then he must endorse the process of liberation through social change. The developmental process through capitalism will not adequately liberate the poor because injustice was seen to be built into the very system of capitalism. Liberation theology had studied the social structures using the legitimate scientific tools of structural analysis. For this reason, liberation theology has been branded as being communist and condemned by the church, which initially supported it. The church then systematically suppressed liberation theology. Chin Chin received her bachelor's and master's degrees at the Asian Social Institute in Manila, Philippines. She was exposed to the various currents in intellectual thought, as well as various theories of social change. The most impactful of them was, of course, liberation theology. Like the Latin American countries, the Philippines too was predominantly Christian and Catholic, unlike other Asian countries. Chin Chin's studies coincided with the immense social upheaval in the Philippines by movements challenging Ferdinand Marcos's dictatorship and martial law. In this charged environment, Chin Chin immersed herself in genuine demands for greater democracy. She took part in street marches, in mass demonstrations, and direct community engagement in the slum areas, in farming communities, and in fishing villages. She found herself at recognizing Jesus as a great liberator, seeking total freedom, both political and economic, and for all people. Her ideological transformation was through the concept of conscientization, which Chee Keong mentioned, which she defined as the process of becoming aware of the social and political realities, recognizing the issues that shape life, understanding them, and taking action. When she returned to Malaysia, she attempted to link faith to social analysis and underscored the need for Christians to grapple with Malaysian societal issues. Her activities were later used by authorities, alleging that she was promoting the influence and ideology of communism and engaging in conscientization work, which was perceived by the state, by the deep state, as a threat to national security. Of course, that led her to her arrest. I was contemplating writing a book on Chin Chin. I was married to Theresa Lim Chin Chin for 38 years, although I had known her for 51 years. After her passing last year, I came across a piece of writing by her telling her side of the story 18 years after her detention. She called it her historical journal. She herself narrates how events unfolded in detention. She wrote, "Writing this historical journal has not been easy. I had to relive some of the feelings I felt then, feelings which I would much rather bury and forget. I had thought that these memories would be buried forever. I had hoped that over time they would be forgotten and die, and with their passing, all undesirable traces of the experience will be erased completely. I would have continued blissfully with my life had I not been confronted with the fact that I am still affected by the experience even after so many years." For Chin Chin, Operation Lalang was the most devastating episode of her life. She never really got over the trauma. She never spoke about what she wrote. It was a discovery. She was not one who would seek publicity for herself. So, should I respect her wishes and not write about her? She has left behind a legacy so precious that it would be a neglect to preserve it under a bushel and not let the world know about it. So I prepared this book on Theresa Lim Chin Chin. You will notice the double-barreled authorship of this book. It is based on two journals fused together. I started writing my own journal on the day she was arrested to the day she was released. It was mainly about me, and the ordeal we both went through together, in spite of the fact that she was in detention and I was out in the world. In my journal, I was talking to Chin, like I was writing a letter to her. There was interaction between her letters and my replies to her. Then I could piece together my journal and her journal of reflection and sync them together in the book. There are also other voices in the book. Chin's sister Elizabeth wrote her memories of Chin's early life. Our two sons, Daniel and Joel, also wrote their perspectives of their mother. There are also tributes from her friends. The book is a combined effort from all of us. I put it all together in one book. Now, Chin's euphoria of being released was met by a colossal betrayal, not from the poor people, but from the very institutions that employed and commissioned her work, specifically the Council of Churches. Despite their rhetoric and social issues on justice, they were too afraid to be associated with her after Operation Lalang crackdown, betraying institutional cowardice. For a social worker dedicated to community upliftment, this restriction, which prohibited work with societies, was an agonizing form of professional exile. Our life together was much more than that dreadful 7 months of Operation Lalang. After her release, we turned the page and she changed her career. We lived a very happy family life with our sons Daniel and Joel. And she was enchanted to be able to visit, spend time, and pour out her love on her two grandsons, Luke and Liam. This happy story in the book is illustrated with pictures. After Chin's passing, we had a celebration of life for her. In short notice, we had an unexpected turn-up of more than 150 people. We did a write-up of that event with a great number of tributes from her numerous friends. I did not include all that in the book, lest it became too bulky. However, I have provided a link and a QR code through which you can access it. Chin Chin never lost sight of her original compass. She worked with the same goal and objectives with women's organizations. I quote from Chang Tian Chua, the former Batu Member of Parliament. He says, Chin Chin's sacrifices had paved the way for today's movements. Her unwavering spirit will continue to inspire us forward. Her legacy lives on in our hearts as well as in the fight for justice. Tian Chua. But Chin Chin, having endured the whole process, adds a caveat in her journal. I quote, "The choice to be deeply involved should never be made lightly because there are serious and heavy penalties, particularly in authoritarian regimes. Activist or not, young or old, we should never romanticize the accompanying risks that are concomitant in being involved with people and in challenging power structures. Those planning to be involved must be helped to be prepared for this as much as possible to minimize the impact on their lives and psyche." End of quote. Chin Chin lived an eventful life of contribution to society with a deep conviction in social justice, until it was cut short by physical disabilities and brought all too soon to an abrupt end. Chin became afflicted with a number of extremely rare and incurable ailments. This was the second devastating blow in her life. Her life became a painful journey. She was no longer her vibrant self. She was a silent sufferer. She did not complain. She lived a simple life and touched the hearts of countless people who came to know her. I would like to quote from Cecilia Ng, who was supposed to have been one of the speakers this morning, but unfortunately she was busy today. She says, Chin Chin lived boldly. She dared to speak when silence was demanded. She mothered and mentored with grace. She carried hope through hardship and turned wounds into wisdom. Though detained, her mind was never imprisoned. Though tested, her courage never wavered, and she walked ahead so others could walk free. I quote also from Saras, the member of PSM. She says, as a committed leader, she mobilized and radicalized youth through the lens of liberation theology, drawing strength and purpose from the Bible in the fight for justice. Finally, a word from the Star newspaper. Her efforts alongside fellow activists eventually contributed to the abolition of the ISA in 2012. Chin was close to nature. In the mornings, she would talk to her plants and flowers, especially to her pink hibiscus. A small bud emerges from the plant. It develops and blossoms into a bright and colorful flower, beautiful to behold. It wrinkles, fades, detaches from the parent plant, and falls to the earth and becomes part of it. It is nature that has embraced Chin Chin's being, and we will try to learn to recognize the beauty of her life reflected in the positive forces of Mother Nature. I will end with an ode I wrote to her. Home is where the heart is. My heartthrob is no longer there. Everything in-house reminds me of her, and it has come to this. Dave, I am dying. To me she did utter. Chin, think of living, but she knew better. Just hang in there, Chin. We'll get through this and go home. We'll be together again. It'll be awesome. She could not see or speak. Could she hear the words we spake into her ear? Painful to see her suffer so. A momentary peace in her final breath, agonizing to let her go. She is no more. A life of activism brought to an abrupt end, only images and memories fond, the only realism. She was my anchor. Now I am adrift, unable to hold her without my priceless gift. Thank you for sharing your sweet life. Your illness robbed me of a loving wife. The book on your death I am closing. The book on your life I am opening. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Dave Anthony. Now, I'd like to cover a few gaps in today, explaining some of the things that were covered, perhaps in a bit of brief detail about Mum, her life, her illnesses, and I'm going to start off with her final days. So just earlier this week, actually on Tuesday, I fell ill with a high fever, and I had a bacterial infection. So my father drove me to the clinic. The doctor took a blood test. Within 10 minutes, he could tell me, okay, you are very likely to have a bacterial infection. Here's some antibiotics. Go home. You're still sick. You come back later. I wish it was that simple for Mum. I wish it was that touch and go. I wish Mum's final diagnosis could have just been like that. Despite how far we've come with medical technology today, unfortunately, we still don't know so much. What I felt, it felt similar to what Mum complained about. She felt fatigue. And this was an different kind of fatigue. In her last days, in fact, about 5 to 6 months before she passed away, she complained about this overwhelming fatigue that couldn't be solved. It was just she could have a good night's sleep, she could wake up feeling refreshed but fatigued, just still tired, out of energy. She used to be able to get through about half a day before taking a light siesta. Now she had to take a full-blown nap in the afternoon. And I looked at weather trends and I would tell her, this is global warming, it's hot and sweaty, this is draining your energy. So sometimes she would come, go to the air-conditioned room in the evening, she'll feel much better. So I said, yeah, it's the heat. I kind of wrote it off as that. I mean, we all get tired in the afternoon, we all get hot and sticky in the afternoon. I thought it was that, But she suffered from an entire barrage of health issues. None of these can be taken in isolation. So at her celebration of life, I said this: Chin Chin was dealt a cruel hand of rotten cards. I stand by it. I do not wish this cocktail of ailments on anybody, not even the people I hate the most. She could have thrown down all these cards at any point and just given up at any time in the past, and we all would have understood. In fact, at some point in her life, she actually told us that she was considering euthanasia. Yet, she still chose not to. She knew the option was on the table, she still chose not to. Most of her illnesses were classified as autoimmune. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the term, it's a blanket terminology. It's given to illnesses where the body's immune system, that's designed to protect us, it malfunctions, and then it starts attacking our body instead. It's sort of like if the police, hypothetically, starts persecuting the citizens that they're supposed to protect. Hypothetically, not saying it actually happens. And so this entire list of things like myasthenia gravis, SLE or lupus, neuromyotonia, etc., the list goes on. Her specialist noted that these conditions, they are all rare conditions, and they come in droves when the immune system malfunctions. There are so many of them, some benign, some fatal, some that are crippling. She had an interesting mix of many of them. And they're so rare that undergrad medical students are actually more likely to hear of them from an episode of House MD or Grey's Anatomy. As Mum had noted, that some of these actually only appear as a footnote in this thick handbook that most doctors bring around. Even her diabetes was a rare type known as type 1.5. Most of us know type 1 and type 2, and when she heard type 1.5, she thought the doctor was joking, but apparently not. It was known as LADA, latent autoimmune diabetes in adults. And so we have all of these ailments affecting her body, but she was still a very aware person. She was very conscious about her surroundings, about the world around her. That's why in 2019, she was dealt another cruel blow after a botched cataract operation. This cataract operation permanently destroyed her vision in one eye. While the other eye was still capable of vision, it was slowly being taken away by another autoimmune disorder, which was retinal degeneration, where the body was attacking the retina. This is a condition so severe that most remedies that restore vision cannot fix retinal degeneration. She watched the world become darker and darker, while most of us were stuck indoors, putting up with a lockdown that was managed by a truly incompetent coup government. Her final weeks with us, when we realized something was terribly, terribly wrong, was when she got an appointment with the hospital for a process known as intravenous immunoglobulin, or IVIG. This is a 5-day treatment process for her lupus, and normally after she gets IVIG, she's very gung-ho. She'll say, Daniel, go look up Air Asia, I want to go to Melbourne, I want to see Joel, I want to see my grandchildren. This time it was different. After 1 day, she felt a bit of relief, but that was it. That was all the relief she felt. After a 5-day treatment, she felt no better. She was then admitted to the hospital less than a week after that treatment, and from there the mystery deepened. The doctors, they embarked on this massive triage, trying to find what infection was causing this. All that we knew was her blood was not in good shape. Her blood counts were low, similar to the effect of what dengue would do to people. But it wasn't dengue. So what was it? Normally, blood tests for infections, you don't want them to be positive. You don't want to hear, I'm sorry you have dengue, I'm sorry you have this, I'm sorry you have that. But everything was negative. She wasn't infected. She didn't have any bacterial strain. The mystery just deepened and deepened. The doctors poured over everything. They took a bone marrow biopsy. But aside from fatigue, her vitals, blood pressure, oxygen, everything okay. You know, she was jokingly telling us, I don't know what I'm doing here. Only later, when rheumatology couldn't figure out what's wrong with her, that they transferred her to hematology, and that from there, her condition worsened quickly. It was then when she almost totally stopped eating. She stopped getting up for short walks. She stopped going to the bathroom. In fact, it was the last time she was ever on her feet. She was then reportedly having hallucinations, some of which my father believes may have actually been haunting memories of Operation Lalang coming back to haunt her. One night, she asked my father, have they locked up outside? She asked me to switch off lights that didn't exist, to turn off, to not touch certain things in the room that weren't there. By the time we had a diagnosis, which was certain, Chin Chin was unfortunately too weak to begin chemotherapy. Yes, her diagnosis was non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, a form of blood cancer. See, out of all the possible suspects, we had so many things on the list, all these autoimmune diseases. Every one of them was a suspect in the lineup. None of us ever thought that cancer would eventually be what would take her away from us. She then developed a lung infection that doctors were unable to treat due to the weakened state of her blood. They feared that any treatment, anything invasive, would cause her to bleed out on the operating table. On her final day with us, she struggled to breathe and was unable to communicate with us. Mom had always told me that passing in one's sleep is the best way to go. In her own way, in this small way, she got to go out on her own terms. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at 3:30 a.m. on 20th July 2025. It was just 11 days short of what would have been her 69th birthday. In fact, it was one of her wishes that she could see her 69th birthday, but unfortunately she did not make it to that point. Those were her last days. Now I'd like to ask how many of you here personally knew Lim Chin Chin? Can I see a show of hands? Personally knew, okay. How many of you know her as Madam Lim? Or a Theresa? Or Chin? Or Chin Chin? You see? There's so many names she could have gone by. But that really didn't matter much, because that was just an identifier to who she was. Because Mum, she seldom cared about spotlight. She seldom cared about even when she signs documents. One day it's Theresa, another day it's Chin Chin, because the bank tells her it has to be her real name based on her IC. You know? She taught me many things in life. She taught me how to ride a bicycle. She taught me how to use certain hardware in the kitchen. She taught me how to solve algebra. But today, I want to talk about what I learned following her passing, which is the meaning of activism. You know, my mom showed me what it means to be selfless. Now, I grew up in a very different time from both my parents. I'm 34 this year. We have a significant age gap. Though we both witnessed the advent of the internet together, you know, it's different growing up with it and seeing it shape entire generations for better or for worse. Social media and the internet, it had catalyzed this new generation of what I call, or what a lot of people actually are starting to wake up to as false activism. It's one that has manifested in the form of a term you may have heard of, the keyboard warrior. And a lot of these false activists are fixated on the destructive and demeaning forms of upholding a cause. Sometimes this manifests in a terminology called cancel culture, where you dismiss someone because they disagree with 1% of your manifesto or something like that. Or they've done something in another part of their life that invalidates their entire activist life here. internet activists, they often get lost in this euphoria of mob justice, that they lose sight of building towards ideals. Instead, we end up with a lot of echo chambers all over the internet. And this practice sometimes gets branded with another term, slacktivism. It is a force that can even hijack the most noble causes at the end of the day, because it's just a form of convenience activism. This kind of activism stems from internet trends, where it's cool to be an activist, because it makes you look intelligent, it makes you seem concerned with the world around you. So many people who pretend to be caught up with this, they're merely looking out for what is in it for me. What is in it for me when I get involved in this activism? Mum was different in that. She fought for causes that sometimes didn't even apply to her. Yes, she was in women's rights, but Mum was, in no abject way in a state of hardcore poverty. Yes, she grew up poor, having to go through certain things, but she fought even after breaking out of that from her with the hard work of her family and hard work of herself. She wouldn't have to necessarily push herself into the definition of being poor, but yet she didn't give up on fighting for the poor, because she didn't look at activism and ask, what's in it for me? She wanted to change the world. She wanted the world to be a better place. Yes, maybe, in a long karmic loop, this is what is in it for me, but that's not how she approached this. She had always had justice on her mind. But for me, I got caught up with the wrong realm. And I clashed with Mum several times on this subject. On one hand, I wrote this euphoria, I'm a useful member of society because I do this, I care about this, I talk about this. But then again, it was always because I was thinking of myself. I was selfish. But I learned that mere association with certain causes is just preaching to the choir. That's nothing more than slacktivism. But we see slacktivism in so many outlets today, from social media accounts that believe if I put a flag next to my name, then, I'm making a difference. Or then now we also have malicious individuals who try to take a cause and bend its definition to benefit themselves or to make their so-called activism easier. Now, this was highly catalyzed by the COVID pandemic. It caused irreversible damage to our society, and I'd argue it goes far beyond any destruction caused by the virus. Because of the spirit of we need all the help we can get, it has been corrupted by fair weather activists who are now seen on the front line, who unfortunately abandon their cause the moment things turn adversarial. I contrast this with the time before the Bersih rally was a bustling demonstration, a street party where Malaysians could gather and, have fun. To the time when Mum and Dad were at the very first Bersih rally. And what were they greeted by? They were greeted by tear gas and water cannons laced with unknown chemicals. I was at Bersih 3 and I was sprayed with water cannons that are laced with God knows what. It felt like being sprayed with chicken curry, not in the pleasant way. It burned my skin, and I have a feeling that whatever they put in that thing is not very humane. My friends, we are not immune to propaganda. Not a single individual in this room is immune to propaganda. This is why conscientization is such an invaluable tool. It is not just some form of academic education. In this age where we outsource our thinking to machines and ChatGPT, we have to remember how to make the right decisions, but not just choose from one or another. We have to remember why we do and understand why we do what we do. For it is in this vacuum of rationality that injustice will win, and it will go further than that. It will permeate our society. Because activism doesn't come with a handbook or an instruction manual. Mum's story, especially in the way that information was handled during her detention, what the police told my father versus what the police told her, it reminds us to be wary to those who attempt to dictate what it means to be an activist, and to oppose those who attempt to enforce the words of such false prophets before people start going out there and trying to dictate objective truth. For the enemies of justice, they will always find ways to survive. The incentive is always there. Greed, corruption, money, it's always there. We must never allow our spirits to be usurped or hijacked by them, because the last thing that we should ever end up doing is fighting for the enemy. It is through learning about Mum's life before I was born that the meaning of a true activist was revealed to me. Mum was busy with a lot of things after I was born. She was busy working, she was busy taking care of the headache that I am. So therefore, it was difficult to see the full-time activist in Mum. But learning about it through this book and through reading her works, it revealed to me activism has always been about the cause. It is about putting a cause before oneself. It is very rarely about the individual. This is why it's to no surprise we know Chin Chin by so many names. The name is just an identifier. The causes were what she put before herself. Even as she ventured from activism unto the corporate world, she brought along many of the values she believed in. You know, those who are obsessed with this image of activism, once again, people who put themselves first, you know, they'll be very quick to say Chin Chin's a traitor. She was a traitor to the cause of liberation theology. Why? She became a cog in the capitalist system that drives the corporate world today. Oh, you've betrayed the cause. But Chin Chin herself struggled with this transition because she never lost sight of justice. Her versatility is what allowed her to, in the corporate world, cut through so much jargon, protocol, and meaningless procedure and find actual meaning. And she eventually climbed the corporate ladder that allowed her to give me, my father, my brother, everyone the life we now enjoy today, all without losing sight of the justice she believed so strongly in. I like to share that she became a great mentor to many, like my late niece Jennifer. Her late niece Jennifer, my cousin. Mum was Jennifer's mentor in helping her find a footing in an IT career. She encouraged Jennifer to take up the study. When Jennifer was struck with a cruel blow that was breast cancer, she turned to Mum for spiritual guidance on how to deal with her illness. Jennifer sadly passed away 1 month before Mum did, succumbing to breast cancer. They too both were supporting each other through advice, and even then I noticed when handing Mum her phone in hospital that Jennifer was just saying, "Hi, we'll talk tomorrow." That tomorrow never came for Jennifer. And in the chaos of the world today, I now long for Mum's guidance and advice, especially in my career path where I'm 34, I'm looking for guidance, I'm looking for direction. This is once again where her spirit and activism shines. As the world charges almost blindly into the fourth industrial revolution, as we see Donald Trump flying out delegates from oligarchs to try and dictate the direction of the corporate, technical, and operational world of tomorrow, activists like Chin Chin simply cannot and never ever will be replaced by a machine or any form of artificial intelligence. Even right now, one could say that Mum has been hard at work. As mentioned a couple of times today, she had donated her body to the Silent Mentor program run in collaboration with University Malaya and the Xiao En Center and also Tzu Chi University of Taiwan. She pledged her body early during the COVID pandemic, and she made sure that I knew about this. I was a witness on the form. Last month, she was initiated as the 183rd Silent Mentor in the program, and through 5 days of intense workshops, students from various disciplines in the University Malaya Faculty of Medicine and also beyond University Malaya in programs that were open to other students of the medical discipline from other universities across Malaysia. They practiced various medical procedures on her cadaver, including intubation, suturing, incisions, all honing the skills that they will bring into their practice of saving lives. In fact, during that week, my father and I consented to further studies on Chin Chin's body, including experimental treatments in knee and ENT surgical procedures, which could play a part in the betterment of medicine. In this world, where trillions upon trillions of dollars of investment and capital are poured into weapons of genocide and murder, into operations of ethnic cleansing. Chin Chin's humble donation goes beyond what the riches of the world can buy today. It truly moves the needles in more ways than one. Therefore, I hope, Chin Chin, my mother's story inspires you, and it reminds us all of the meaning of what it means to be an activist. This book, it's not particularly pleasant to read. This is not a book that you read if you want your day to remain happy. Sorry to say that. But it is also a reminder that there is no excuse to forget about the stories that are in it, and that we should never ever live in a world where we can pretend that the events in this story did not happen. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here today. Now, I would like to invite Aliran President Anil Neto to launch the book. One, two. Once again, we would like to thank Anil Neto as well as Aliran for making this event today possible. Now, we'd like to invite our speakers to also, we'll just pass the mic around. We can do this informally, to have a Q&A session where we're going to talk about, ask anything you would like about the book and share any memories you may have of Chin Chin, or a journey in activism that you feel may be relevant.
Hello, I'm Edmund Woon. I want to take the mic first because I have to go. I'm a priest. I have a funeral at 1 o'clock in Lalang. As I was sitting through this book launch, I'm very impressed. First of all, to Dave for compiling her writings. It has become, I think, an invaluable source of a person, an activist in Malaysia, and a Christian activist struggling with her faith. Very well written by both of you. And not only, as I said, not only her, but you too. Thank you very much, really, excellent. Second thing is, I got 2 more points. I think your mom, by the way, I knew Chin Chin because we were together in school in Form 6 in Santa Cruz, Ipoh. All right. So I think your mom, DNA, would be absolutely delighted to see you today. I think you encompass both her and Dave's, your father's passion for justice. And intellectual and moral clarity, and the giving of oneself beyond yourself. I think it's incredible, and taking risks. That is so much of in Theresa. I call her Theresa. That's how I knew her when I first knew her. Anyway, yeah. So I know she struggled with her faith. In my visits to her, which was not very frequent, which I thought on hindsight would have been better if I spent more time. Maybe I visited her once a year or once in 2 years. But I also sense her love, her movement to Buddhism. Yeah? Maybe more of vipassana, meditation and yoga. And I think there was a great source of consolation, comfort, peace for her. And I think she needed that. But I believe that she's still very much a Christian. And this Sunday's reading is from First Letter of St. Peter. It says this: if you have some share in the sufferings of Christ, be glad. because you will enjoy a much greater gladness when His glory is revealed. It is a blessing for you when they insult you for bearing the name of Christ, because it means that you have the Spirit of glory, the Spirit of God resting on you. None of you should ever deserve to suffer for being a murderer, a thief, a criminal, or an informer. But if any one of you should suffer for being a Christian, then he or she is not to be ashamed of it. He should thank God that he has been called one. I believe Theresa Lim Chin Chin is really a Christian. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to share? Or anyone have any Q&As about the book? We have 2 former detainees, the author here. There's a lot of history to be dug up, not just in the book, but there's many other stories in the hall right now that we can talk about. You know, when somehow Mum has been a very practical person throughout a lot of this. And one of the things that she did is that she actually, as my father mentioned, she said to him in the hospital, "Dave, I am dying." And it wasn't just some passing remark from pain or something. This was carried through, because what she told me was, "Daniel, bring your laptop. I want to talk to you about my estate." She did go through everything in incredible surgical detail. This is why I don't doubt her recollection of Operation Lalang, because she told me that if she passes, which building to go to, which floor to go to, which counter, which person to ask for, who has her will. You know, she had all these instructions for me, not like it's there, go find it. She knew exactly where it was. She told me exactly how to get it. She remembers things in such vivid, incredible detail. And she's a practical person, because the next thing she told us is, "I don't want funeral." She said, "I don't want a funeral." And her good friend Judith Loh actually had the best response to that. "Chin, funeral is for us, not for you." And that's why we are very grateful to all of Chin Chin's friends, because they're the ones who came together to help us put together the Celebration of Life event. They helped us with the venue, they helped us with catering, and it was a very beautiful event. As we said, we didn't expect a large crowd, but boom, suddenly standing room only. Yes.
I'd just like to say that Chin Chin was really special. We were housemates for a couple of years when I was living in KL. She's one of those people, who never shouts any slogan, who doesn't have to talk too much. She just did it with all her action. And that's why I think today we are gathered with a true respect for what Chin Chin means and, what true activism means. You don't have to shout slogans, you don't have to say too much. You just show it with your action.
Thanks for sharing. Well, yeah, you want to mention about the books offered today? Yeah, cover Yeshua as well.
book has just been published, and it is being sold at the bookshops for 48 ringgit, but I am selling it for 30 ringgit, discounted price. And together with this book, I am also offering the book Yeshua as a complimentary copy. Now, this book is about Jesus the man, the Yeshua Ecce Homo, because when Pontius Pilate stood Jesus before the audience, he said, Yeshua Ecce Homo. He said, Jesus, behold the man. So this is the story of Jesus the man. This is a different version from the gospel version of Jesus. So I'm offering this book because Jesus was a role model for Chin Chin, and also, honestly, I'm giving it free because nobody wants to read it. You see? But if I offer it to Christians, they'll say, oh, all I know about Jesus is already in the Gospels. I don't want to know anything more about him. And then if I offer to non-Christians, they say, oh, Jesus, no, you're evangelizing. So I'm not evangelizing in this book. It's a different version of Jesus, the man. So it's free. If you don't want to take it, it's fine. I'm offering it together with the other book. So I also brought with me 2 of my previous books, which are now out of print. I only got a few copies of it. If anybody's interested, you're welcome. And I'm selling them all at a reduced, discounted price. So, yeah, that's all. Thank you.
And with each purchase, we'll also be including a complimentary bookmark here. And if there's anything you want to let us know about, want to stay in touch, or any comments about the book, you can find Dave's email and phone number at the back of the bookmark. So just feel free to reach out with any feedback you might have, or if you would like to inquire or actually even order extra copies of the book for distribution. Please don't be afraid to get in touch. Once again, we will include the bookmark with every sale. Just flip it over to the back. You'll find it at the bottom of the bookmark. The thing about the special branch visiting you is you wouldn't know. And they might be, yeah, you wouldn't know one. Yeah. Now she asked if the special branch visited us. If the special branch visit you, you don't know. They're probably in one of the Proton sagas outside. You know? Yeah, we know you're there.